All right. Hi, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started today. And I think some more people will be joining in while we do the introductions here. So thank you all for joining us. My name is Annie Oxford. I'm the Administrative Director for the Association for Fire Ecology. This is our fourth and final online session this spring for the AFE Student and Early Career Connections. Today, we're really excited to have presenters from the Joint Fire Science Program share more information about their work and also graduate student and undergraduate student opportunities. So before we get started, we just have a few items to share, some updates from AFE and from SAFE. Mark, do you want to introduce yourself now before we get started?
Sure. Mark Kybe. Glad to be here. I'm a retired fire ecologist, retired from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and I see some familiar names and faces already joined us, so thanks.
Thanks. Mark is also, what he didn't say is he sits on several AFE committees and also on the AFE board of directors, and he's been helping a lot in the recent months with student activities for the organization. So thanks for being here and co-hosting, Mark. So before we get started, we just wanted to briefly introduce SAFE for those of you who are not familiar. SAFE is the student section for the Association for Fire Ecology. So if you join the Association Fire Ecology as a member and you mark that you're a student, you automatically are part of SAFE. We have currently about 80 members. That fluctuates between 80 to 100 student members, depending on the year. Mostly undergraduate and graduate students, and at universities or colleges with a fire program or with a group of students, there are typically a SAFE chapter will form there. And so those are local chapters where the SAFE members can meet in person and be a club or student association at their university. We have a national officer team, which is made up of 4 officers that are elected each year that provide overall leadership to all of the students and then the local chapters and kind of help guide priorities and activities for that year. And typically, AFE holds a conference every year. We have not been doing, well, since 2019, we haven't had an event in the United States. And so during that time, this hasn't been happening, but typically every year we have an event, and student activities are a big part of that event. And the national officers sit on those program committees and help plan those activities for students. This year, our event, the first one since 2019 in the States, is the 10th International Fire Ecology and Management Congress, which will be December in Monterey. And we're currently working on planning activities for students at that conference, and also working on sponsors that will help fund student travel. So often we have SAFE chapters travel together, or we have an application process where students can apply to get a travel grant or to have a registration waiver. So that information will be up on our website in July when registration opens. And now I'm going to turn it over to Mark to talk about our mentoring program.
Thanks, Annie, and welcome everyone. Those that joined late and those that will be joining. Our Mentoring Futures program is open right now until the end of the month. We're looking for mentees and also mentors. This is a great way to get connected with a mentor that's outside of your chain of command. Someone that has some special fire ecology knowledge or fire science knowledge that can give you ideas about your career pathways and different options for your future. So I'd encourage you to consider this. It's a very informal program. It lasts about a year. We've had in the past some special offerings where, for example, Steve Pine has taught a short writing course that's offered to a couple of the mentees. Those of you might know Dr. Steve Pine, famous fire historian. But anyways, check out our website, check out the program. We'd love to have you, and we do need more mentors as well. So thank you. Another thing I was going to hit on, this is the AFE student and early career connections. So, we're not just trying to provide these career pathways and connections for students, but also folks that are doing different things in their careers right now. They might be doing seasonal jobs, they might be traveling in between semesters, whatever. But if you have interest in fire, we're going to have this series also in the fall. And we're going to have a career panel for one of the sessions. We're also looking at the laboratory of free ring research done in Tucson to give a presentation, and then we're looking for ideas. So if you have some ideas, some organizations or fire connections you'd like to make, let Annie and myself know, because we're going to be scheduling those for the fall semester pretty soon. So with that, let's see, did I need to cover anything else, Annie, or did you?
I forgot to mention that if you'd like to introduce yourself in the chat, we'd love to hear where you're logging in from and anything you want to tell us about your interests or what you're studying in fire.
And we are expanding our SAFE chapter. So if you have an interest at the university or college you're at, we'd love to talk to you about that. So without further ado, we'd like to go to our feature presentation, and that's going to be the Joint Fire Science Program, Command and General Staff. This is a really cool opportunity we have today. Those of you that don't know, the Joint Fire Science Program is a multi-million-dollar national program that funds science, all different aspects, and also student science related to fire. So Karen Dante Wood, the Technical Transfer Specialist for JFSP, take it away. Thank you all very much for being here today.
It looks like Karen's frozen, but I could try and pull up the presentation. It might just take me a minute.
Thanks, Molly.
Yeah, who is going to go second with Joint Fire Science? Does Molly or someone else want to jump in here?
Yeah, that was Casey. Let me just see if I can't pull it up real quick.
Thanks for your patience. I'm trying not to touch anything because I'd mess it up even worse. I'll just stand by.
Hey, Molly, I got it.
You got it? Okay. Thanks, Casey.
Okay. Are we on the screen now?
Yep, you are. You can maximize it. Oh, yeah, that's good.
I know Karen was going to go first, but I'll go first. My name's Casey Shedden. I'm new to the Joint Fire Science Program. I'm the new Fire Technology Transfer Specialist. My experience is in the fuels, fire weather, kind of came into fire in a non-traditional way through electronics, which I can explain later. But yeah, so we'll kick it off. We just got a few slides we're going to go over, just kind of the process of the GRIN process, and kind of a brief overview of what we as Joint Fire Science Program fund, and kind of that role that we play as the convener of research from the research side to the field. And then also we'll have a quick presentation by Spencer after we're completed. So what is Joint Fire Science Program? So we are authorized as a joint partnership between DOI and USDA. We started in 1998. We provide leadership to the wildland fire science community by identifying high priority fire science research needs that will enhance the decision-making ability of managers to meet their objectives. And we'll kind of go into a little bit more what that means to you folks on the research side. We provide funding and science delivery for scientific studies associated with managing wildland fire, fuel, and fire impacted ecosystems. Like the graphic shows on here, our mission, we provide credible research tailored to the needs of fire, fuel, natural resource, and land managers. It ranges a wide breadth of questions, experience, research topics. We listen to our clients and then kind of develop those focused strategic lines of new research responsive to those needs. So meaning like we work with the field, work with the research communities. We kind of go out there and see what are the needs of the fields and how does the research world kind of help make the decisions on the ground. And then through this process, we solicit proposals from researchers who compete for funding through a rigorous peer review process, and we'll go over that a little bit later. And then, like once we have this research, we focus on science delivery to get that that research to the field through assortment of communication tools. There's multiple partners within the JFSP. We have a governing board that kind of helps drive the direction of the program. These include the Forest Service, Bureau of Indian Affairs, Bureau of Land Management, National Park Service, Fish and Wildlife Service, and U.S. Geological Survey. We also have other partners that maybe don't have a formalized agreement with JFSP, but they kind of shape the way that research is rolled out. We also have the collaboration that extends to private and nonprofit organizations, large and small universities, federal agencies, tribal, state, county, and local governments. So we are kind of the one-stop shop for any kind of needs out there that the local land managers might have. In all, we have nearly 300 organizations that have become partners through our research process. Through this slide, we're going to show you kind of the different opportunities that are out there for funding. You might have heard of them as funding opportunity announcements. Now it's formalized as notice of funding opportunities. These are process that we solicit proposals from both government and non-government entities in these three areas below through that NOFO process. The primary, which is the government and non-government entities, have an opportunity to apply for a range of current research priorities called task statements on a yearly basis. These are those ones you'll see, those bigger kind of research questions. Our governing board approves these based on the feedback they get from their partner agencies. And then what you guys are here for, the Graduate Research Innovation, or the GRIN, they're a little bit smaller, and Molly will go into that about the size of those funding opportunities. But we invite current master and doctoral students enrolled at colleges or universities within the US in the field of wildland fire and related physical, biological, and social sciences. And additionally, JFSP also funds the Fire Exchange network. There's 15 regional wildland fire exchanges. And this is another competitive process where there's funding opportunities for these exchange networks. You might have worked with these at your local universities or local areas. I'm going to roll it over to Molly. She wants to take over.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Casey. Yeah, so as Casey mentioned, this GRIN, or Graduate Research Innovation Program, is something that is an initiative that we've been supported for over 10 years now, designed specifically to support graduate students, master's and PhD students currently enrolled at universities. And these are small awards. They're capped at $25,000, and they're meant to really supplement your existing graduate research program. So sometimes people might add a research site, they might add an extra year of study, or they might add some kind of tech transfer piece. Maybe it's a workshop or a story map or something like that to relay some of their research to managers. So it's meant to not fund a whole master's or PhD program, but to supplement what you're already doing. There's lots of topics. It's really, really broad. So everything from fires and fuels management, changing fire environment, emissions, air quality, lots of things that a GRIN project can fall under. So it's pretty broad in terms of the topics that we'll entertain. But the purpose of this is to just kind of give students that experience in writing proposals, because it is a real, research proposal that you are supposed to write. And it gives you kind of that experience in trying to craft your research so that it is really applicable to management decisions. So we ask that you really think about that in your proposals. Next slide, Casey. Thank you. There's a different process that we go to kind of screen any applications that we get for this program. One is just sort of the basic eligibility. So some of the things that are required, you have to be a student, again, a graduate student, master's or PhD student. And this has to be a supplement to your existing research project. So that means that your research proposal, the initial research project proposal has to be already approved by your graduate committee. And so sometimes, for example, we've had to reject applications because they don't indicate that what they're proposing is a supplement to their existing work, and that their existing work has been approved by their graduate committee. So there's actually a checkbox that you can check to say that those things are true. And sometimes we've had to reject things when people haven't checked the box. So, but anything that goes beyond that, that basic check, we make sure that it is indeed eligible for the GRIN program. We then send those proposals on to the Association for Fire Ecology, and they run our peer review process for us. So they'll recruit lots of experts in wildland fire, and they'll get together and read the proposals and evaluate them on a host of different criteria. So that includes, the qualifications of the student, their academic performance, their work experience, research experience, and also just the merit of the proposal. So they'll look at the scientific merit, they'll look at the hypotheses and how the student intends to test the hypotheses. And then they'll look at, the relevance of that science question and their plan for communicating the science to managers to make sure, again, that the science is going to be useful for informing decisions, because that's a big part of our program. So the Association for Fire Ecology will come back to the program and say, these are, here's a list of proposals that we think are worthy of funding. And then that goes on to our governing board. So that's the third process there, the program review. The governing board makes the financial decisions for the program. And so they'll take a look at the proposals that are recommended for funding and decide yes or no, we agree with that recommendation. Sometimes they might add some proposals or take some out for different reasons. But they take that peer review into consideration when they're making their decision. And then once the governing board makes their decision, and then it goes on to kind of a final quality check that the BLM requires us to do before we send any money out the door. So next slide. So last year, we got 23 proposals that made it past that initial eligibility that went on to the peer review, and 19 were funded. So those are pretty good odds. And the topics were wide ranging. I think you'll hear from one coming up here, the impacts of wildfire and climate change on Western larch regeneration, but then, also field treatment effects on avian diversity, navigating collaborative wildfire risk reduction. So there's all kinds of topics that can fall under GRIN and have been successful. Students from all over the country, many different universities, both master's and PhD students have been successful. And I will notice that the odds aren't always this good. So sometimes in some years we've gotten over 50 GRIN proposals and funded less than half of them. So just really how competitive it is really just depends on the year and how many proposals we get. Next slide. Okay, so what's coming up? The program office right now, we're in the process of working on our upcoming notice of funding opportunity. There's several approvals that it has to go through before we can actually post that. So we're hopeful that it can be posted sometime this summer, maybe early fall at the latest, but we won't really know until those approvals are completed. Once it is open, you have 60 days to respond. So it's a pretty quick timeline. But what you can do to prepare yourself if you're interested perhaps in the program is look at past GRIN announcements. They don't change that much year to year. So if you look at one of our past notice of funding opportunities, you can kind of get a sense for what we ask for. And that can help you, I think, get a head start if you do think you're going to apply this year. And then, of course, if you have any questions, you could reach out to us. That address there kind of goes to the whole office, and your question will be kind of passed off to the right person. So I think that's it. With that, I'm going to pass it over to David Godwin, who is a former GRIN recipient. We won't say how long ago that was. But he's gone on to a very successful career with the Southern Fire Exchange. And then in addition to that, he's served as a peer reviewer on our GRIN panel. So he has a good sense of kind of what it takes to write a successful GRIN proposal.
Well, thanks, Molly. Can you see my slides?
Yep.
Cool. All right, just checking. Thanks, everybody. It's good to see you here on Zoom. I'm glad to see a variety of folks on the call. Yeah, my name is David Godwin, and I am the director of the Southern Fire Exchange program with the University of Florida AFE. And I'm going to talk a little bit about, just kind of broadly speaking, about my experience with the GRIN program, what being a GRIN awardee allowed me to do as part of my dissertation work at the University of Florida. And then, as Molly said, I've been on a handful at this point of GRIN review panels. And I kind of want to tell you some of the tips and some of the things that may help you make a better proposal to then be reviewed. Some of that I think is going to be a little bit of review of what Molly said, but I think I have a little bit different take on it. So just real quick plug for the Fire Science Exchange Network. You know, if you are not familiar with this group, as students or as future students or former students, I would encourage you to make sure that you know who the Fire Science Exchange folks are, either where you're working or where you're in school or both. You know, I'm biased. I work with the Southern Fire Exchange, so we're that southern green part of the country that roughly covers the area of Forest Service Region 8. But, you know, every single one of these fire science exchanges is really run by a small but truly dedicated group of staff and advisory board members who are passionate about connecting fire science and management in their particular region. And so as you're putting together GRIN proposals in the future, if you're putting together JFSP proposals after that, if you're putting together proposals for other funding agencies, I would really, really encourage you to reach out early on in the development of that proposal process, connect with folks at that Fire Science Exchange, and have a conversation about how you can leverage the investments that JFSP has made in this network to ensure that you have a really robust science delivery as part of your proposal. So briefly, I was, as Molly said, I was one of the early GRIN awardees. I think I was part of the first class. I put together my proposal when I was a PhD student at the University of Florida in the School of Forest Resources and Conservation at the time. Back in the fall of 2010, my professor was Dr. Lita Kobziar, who was at UF, now at University of Idaho. And so, you know, generally speaking, the GRIN program helped to expand an existing graduate dissertation program that I already had funding for, that I already had started. I was several years already into my studies, and GRIN helped to take it to another level into some new areas. And I'm going to talk about that briefly. It opened up opportunity for new study areas. It opened up opportunity, the GRIN did, for new partnerships with land management organizations. And then it opened up new opportunities for science delivery and connections with those organizations. So first off, thinking about the new study area, I'm not going to go into the details of my project, but broadly speaking, I was looking at how prescribed fire was impacting soil carbon respiration and soil carbon dynamics in ecosystems in Florida, native ecosystems in Florida. I already had established study sites at the University of Florida School Forest, north of Gainesville, in a flatwoods ecosystem, and I already had established research ongoing at Tall Timbers Research Station and some of their fire ecology plots there. What GRIN did was allowed me to expand my study to a whole new study area at the Ocala National Forest. And that really did several things. One, it allowed me to kind of bring my research into a developing study that was going on at the Osceola National Forest that was looking at mechanical treatments, mowing in pine flatwoods. It was looking at burn treatments in pine flatwoods and a combination treatment of mowing plus burning. And so there was already a team that was coming together to put on a research program in collaboration with the folks, the fire management and land management folks at the Osceola National Forest. And GRIN allowed me to bring my project in and support what they were doing and also expand my research. So it was really powerful to be able to connect there. And not only could I connect with the other researchers who were developing these plots at the Osceola National Forest, it also allowed me as a graduate student at the time to interact with a new land management agency as part of my dissertation research. So up until that point, I was working with Tall Timbers, which was a nonprofit, and also working through our school forest folks at the university. But being able to bring in a study area on national forest lands gave me the opportunity to meet, interact with, and understand better as a student how land management decisions were being made, what it was actually like managing fire on the land. I had a chance to several times to go out and participate in prescribed fires on the study units. And all this, I think, just really helped to expand my understanding of fire on national forest lands in a way that just wasn't going to be possible without the GRIN funding. So then GRIN also opened up an opportunity for expanded science delivery as a graduate student. So being able to tie in with that study on the Osceola National Forest and that research team there allowed me to participate and then present my research at a field workshop in, I think it was 2012, on the Osceola National Forest, where we had 40 to 50 different land managers from around the North Florida area. These were folks who represented federal agencies, state agencies, nonprofits, private landowner groups. They were all together as part of what was a C4 field workshop that was highlighting and discussing the findings of the research on those plots in the Osceola National Forest. You know, it provided as a graduate student, it was a huge opportunity for networking to meet and learn from these regional land managers. And it was also, for me, the first time I had interacted with the folks with the Southern Fire Exchange in a science delivery way. And of course, that kind of helped really lay the foundation for my engagement with the Fire Science Exchange, with the Southern Fire Exchange, and then really projected to where I've been able to get today in leading the organization. I will also add that the GRIN Award helped me to, along with other funding from our university and some funding from AFE, to be able to present my research at the 2012 Fire Ecology Congress in Portland, Oregon. So overall, you know, those three things, being able to expand my research, connect with land managers in the region, and increase science delivery, were really all possible because of GRIN. So real quickly, I want to talk about some of the things that I have learned along the way as being part of 3 or 4 different GRIN review panels. And then I've also written quite a few letters of support from our Fire Science Exchange on behalf of our exchange and in support of GRIN proposals. And so these are just some things that I've learned along the way and I think may help you as you develop your future proposals. First of all, make sure that you have a proposal that's easy to read. All right, so as Molly mentioned, there are multiple panels of different experts that are pulled together to help review these different proposals that come in for GRIN. But honestly, you know, even though we subdivide these proposal groups by different subject areas, we're not all experts in everything. And when proposals come in that are really heavy with jargon and acronyms, and it's just really meaty, it makes it a struggle for us to evaluate the proposal effectively, and honestly wrap our heads around what you're proposing to do. So make sure that your proposal is easy to read. And then after that, make sure that you convince us that what you're saying you're going to do is super important, because your proposal is competing against the other proposals, and the ones that we're able to understand and evaluate by reading it quickly and say, actually, this is important work to be done, because we already have an idea of what needs to be done in different areas and across the network and across the landscape of the country in certain areas. But sometimes we may not understand why what you're saying is really, really critically important. So make sure you convince us that and convey that in your writing. Third, make sure that you write in your proposal and demonstrate that you can actually do what you say you want to do. We understand that these are proposals coming from graduate students, either master's or PhD level, but make sure that it seems like what you're proposing to do is at a scale that seems like we're going to believe that, yes, you can do this. And yeah, that you have the partnerships, that you have the support, that you have the background that says, yes, you can do this work. I talked about how my proposal was able to connect my graduate work with a new, with Osceola National Forest and with the National Forest in Florida. For me, when I read these proposals, I want to know that you're connecting your existing graduate studies with the needs and the folks who are in land management, right? That's a strong part of the GRIN program, and that needs to be really well articulated in your proposal. And I'm biased, but make sure that you show that your work is connecting with the Regional Fire Science Exchange, right? We talked about how JFSP has invested in the Fire Science Exchange network. So if you're putting in a proposal for more JFSP money, you should be able to demonstrate how you're going to leverage that existing investment in the Fire Science Exchange network to support your science delivery plans. And lastly, I will say letters of support are read by reviewers, and those letters of support, when you have some really strong letters from different partners who are engaged in your project, really do show that you've put effort into collaboration and planning as part of your proposal. And that really does show that you've done your homework. So lastly, if you're not sure about what makes a good proposal, I would suggest and encourage you at some point in your career, or sooner than later, perhaps, to volunteer to be a GRIN proposal reviewer. Because as they say, the more proposals that you read, the more that you see how the process works, you'll have a better idea of what makes a good proposal going forward and how then you can craft a better proposal. So that's what I have today. Thanks so much for your time. If we have time for questions later, I'm happy to chat. And I think next up we have Spencer Vieira, who is with the University of Montana, and he is a current GRIN student. He's going to talk about what he's been doing.
Yeah, thanks, David. David, it looks like you'll have to, oh, there you go. All right, how is that looking? We got the presentation up there?
Yep, I can see it.
Okay, I turned my video off because I got pretty bad internet, but yeah, so yeah, I'm Spencer Vieira. Yeah, I'm doing a master's degree at the University of Montana, as David mentioned. And yeah, a little bit about me. Before my master's, I had a background in forest management. I did some consulting for and implementing of climate smart forestry in Washington State, which all came after getting an undergraduate degree at the Evergreen State College in Olympia, Washington. And I'm what you call a non-traditional student. I started my undergraduate degree when I was a bit older, at 28 years old. For reference, I'm 33 now, so this has all just been a 5-year trip I've been on. And since then, I've really just been so impressed with all the support there is out there for students seeking this sort of education. All that has led to me pursuing this graduate degree with JFSP GRIN, funding a good portion underlying my thesis. So I'm really grateful for GRIN for that. And as mentioned before, I got this award just last year in 2022. And I thought I'd start by sharing a presentation on an aspect of my GRIN funded project and some of its preliminary results. This way you have an example of work that perhaps is similar to work that you might consider doing if you apply for the GRIN funding yourself. And then after, I'm happy to field questions on how the proposal process was for me as an applicant, and I can try to give some advice if you're planning to apply yourself. So for fun, I figured I'd also share this picture of me preparing to fly in a small plane over the Bitterroot Mountains, just south of where I am here in Missoula, Montana. This was in order to get an aerial view of some fires that burned in the last few decades in the Selway Bitterroot Wilderness. And this is just one example of some of the cool stuff you might end up doing if you can figure out a way to incorporate it into your work and your funding. So yeah, my project was funded by the GRIN to work on for doing work on anticipating climate change's effect on Western larch regeneration after forest fires. My co-authors and advisors were Kim Davis and Phil Higuera, and aspects of this work were also supported by other funding bodies such as Northwest and North Central Climate Adaptation Science Centers and the Montana View Remote Sensing Fellowship. So really a collaboration of funding brought all this to fruition. To start, climate change is impacting fire activity in forests of the Western US, increasing the area burning at high severity, which is putting stress on post-fire forest regeneration, threatening forest loss. Now, past studies demonstrate that management before a fire that supports mature tree survival increases seed availability, which aids natural regeneration so long as climate remains suitable. However, climate suitability is unique to each species, and understanding climate's impact on species-specific regeneration will help identify when post-fire reforestation is necessary and how to go about it. Researchers have found that climate strongly controls post-fire regeneration for tree species at lower tree lines, specifically ponderosa pine and Douglas fir. Shown here in the top left, looking at facets A and C, you can see mean summer VPD and soil moisture of the driest month were the most critical variables for determining post-fire regeneration of ponderosa pine, which for those of you not in the Western US is a dry forest conifer out here. That we're all here in the Western US pretty familiar with. But yeah, as you can see, signified by the vertical dashed line in those facets, the researchers identified specific thresholds to regeneration success. And just to the right, now looking at facets B and D, you can see looking at annual climate variability through time that this threshold, now signified by a horizontal dashed line, has often been crossed. And just below in facets E and F, they're both showing how this has impacted regeneration probability through time, showing a steady decline from 1984 to 2015. Identifying these climatic thresholds are really important. They become key for supporting management decisions around post-fire regeneration, so thus too also post-fire reforestation. However, these thresholds are species specific, and it's less understood if regeneration of species in mid-elevation forests are limited by climate or other factors first. As mentioned in the title page there, the study's focal species is Western larch. Larch inhabits mid-elevation forests strictly in the Columbia River Basin up here in the inland Northwest. And it possesses unique fire resistance and resilience traits, making it a key species for surviving fires and supporting forest regeneration. In this study, we explore the relationship between climate and post-fire larch regeneration. Then we ask, of the factors known to influence regeneration, such as climate, fire effects, and time-sense fire, which most limits Western larch regeneration? And how has climate suitability shifted over recent decades with climate change? And to answer these questions, we traveled to 57 sites across Western larch's range in the Northwestern US, covering the climatic distribution of Western larch. And for the record, that was about 6,000 road miles over 2 summers of field work. And at these sites, we took data on pre and post-fire forest dynamics and destructively sampled roughly 30 large seedlings at each site. This allowed us to bring the seedlings back to the lab, or mostly, at least initially, my front yard, to cut them into cross sections around the first year's growth, so that we could then sand each of those cross sections down to 1500 grit. So ultimately, we could then use dendrochronological methods to assess each seedling's establishment year from those polished annual growth rings. Then ultimately, we related each seedling's establishment year to the seasonal to annual climate that these seedlings germinated and survived in. Moving on to the statistical analysis, to suggest answers to our research questions, we built a machine learning model predicting the probability of large regeneration based on climate and fire-related variables. We then hindcasted those predictions over a climate time series from the past few decades. And our findings reveal that post-fire large regeneration is only marginally limited by climate, with slightly decreased probability during hotter and drier years. This indicates that other factors limit large regeneration first. We found that large regeneration is most successful on northern slopes in higher fire severities and strongly prefers early seral stand conditions during the first 5 years after the fire. In fact, the presence or lack of early seral stand conditions had roughly 50% of influence in the model, making it the most limiting factor for post-fire Western large regeneration. And to really get that point across, we found that 88% of Western large seedlings established in those first 5 years after the fire. So how can post-fire management use these findings? It's important to note that larch remains resilient in warmer and drier climates if seed availability is not an issue. And if a seed tree is missing, reforestation might consider planting on northern slopes, especially in warmer regions of the range. And also plant within the first 5 years after the fire, when early seral stand conditions are most suitable. So in conclusion, this portion of the study, our work suggests that post-fire regeneration of larch remains resilient to the last few decades of increasingly warmer and drier climate. And with a continued increase in areas burning at high severity, thus creating more early seral stand conditions, provided a seed tree is nearby, larch actually may have more recruitment opportunities and a higher proportion in future forests. And finally, these results are all to be incorporated in a post-fire management resource called the Region Mapper. It's an interactive mapping tool that supports decisions around where reforestation is needed after fire, considering seed availability, and what is climatically suitable to grow there, and when is the optimal timing for planting. The JFSP Grant Award was instrumental in funding this work, and without it, this work would not really have been possible. The application process was a great experience too. These are skills that are necessary to build as your career develops, whether you continue with research or management, or work in any field really that has you writing grant proposals. Some of the specific areas that I found really useful to practice, or as a practice writing this proposal, or I guess kind of like the unexpected time sinks were in writing the budget. And this is a part that you just don't really come in expecting as a grad student without this experience. This takes working with your university's grant officers to both develop and get approval for. And because you're working with so many people and people that use a lot of complicating acronyms, and because there's a lot of unexpected accounting related processes to this, it is best really to get started on this early. And I've had a number of students here at University of Montana that have asked me for a little bit of advising and putting together their proposals for GRIN, and this is one of the first things that I really tell them, because it just kind of, it jumped out at me. Otherwise, the proposal writing is really a pleasure. And to reiterate what some people have already said, if you're interested in writing a proposal, the GRIN is interested in research supporting decision makers, be they land managers, practitioners, or policymakers. And you really want to make sure you know what decisions your work is supporting from the outset, and who will be making those decisions. And then also make sure to front that in your proposal, emphasizing how your science will and emphasizing how your science will be really actionable in the field for those decision makers. And yeah, with that, I'll take any questions. I think I'm the last speaker. So I think all of us are able to just join in on this Q&A.
Well, let's check in with Karen also to see if she needed to. Did you want to follow up with anything, Karen?
Well, first, I just wanted to apologize. Of course, there's tech difficulties at the 11th hour, but no, I just wanted to say a big thank you to both David and Spencer for sharing their past and current kind of GRIN diaries. And then I also wanted to let folks on the call know we also have additional program staff from JFSP here today, Becky Jennison, who is our budget analyst. So I did appreciate some of the comments that Spencer had about that. So Becky can answer any questions related to that. And then we also have Colleen Haskell, who's our current acting program manager. So who can answer some of the administrative questions. But with that, back to you, Mark, and happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, we'll just go right into Q&A. If you have questions for any of the presenters or anyone from Joint Fire Science here, you can type them into the chat or just lay it out.
You're welcome to turn on your video and use your audio too.
Hey, I don't think I have any questions. That was really helpful to have both Spencer and the first speaker kind of lay out what they learned. So that kind of clarified a lot of questions I had. So just thank you for all that. I'm definitely going to be presenting or getting a proposal written in the next year or two. And so this was really helpful. So thank you all.
Great. Thanks, Matt.
Hi, I have a quick question, I guess like two questions. One is, how do we volunteer to be a reviewer? I kind of assume it was only professors that did that. And then the other one is, you mentioned that we should connect to the networks, the fire networks in our area. If I'm writing a grant, so I'm going to be a postdoc next year, but if I'm writing grants then, like, I guess I'm just confused, like, what do I reach out to them about, like working on a proposal together or just knowing about them and what they offer? I guess I just don't understand.
I guess I can take a stab at talking about the connecting with the exchanges. So wherever your postdoc will probably be involved with studying or working, that's where I would go ahead and start reaching out to the exchange. So if you know where you're going to be working, find out who the coordinator is for that exchange, and you can just introduce yourself on email and then just kind of start to let them know who you are. And then if you're interested in sharing your work, chances are they're either coordinating webinars or workshops or field tours or things like that. If you're interested in being involved with any of that, then they'll know to reach out to you. Or if you reach out to them, that's even better, and say like, hey, this is what I'm working on. This is what I want to share. And then you can get on their email list. That's pretty easy, low hanging fruit. And then, you can start going to some of these workshops and field tours too. And so that'll help you build your network of folks in the region. That's just kind of my thoughts. If you were coming to the Southeast, just shoot me an email. That's what I would say. And then we could start to chat. And then I always want to know who's working on fire in our region, so that when I'm thinking about projects and future things to work on, they're like, oh, then I've got you as somebody to reach out to and say, hey, we're doing this. We need an expert in this topic. How can we work together? As far as getting on GRIN panels, I think that's maybe an Annie. Can you talk about that? At one time, Tim Shearman was the one who's kind of the lead cat herder for all the GRIN, but that may not be every year.
Yeah, sure. So the AFE Education Committee reviews or helps organize the review of the proposals. And Adam Coates is currently the chair of that committee. And they have kind of a sub team that helps organize that. So I can connect you with Adam if you're interested in that.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay, great.
And Fabiola, I would add to your question about connecting with the exchanges, in addition to what David said about kind of that relationship building, information sharing, I think the beauty of the exchange network and what I've learned is they're really innovative and they're able to get your science out to managers in really different ways. And so, you know, they've been doing a lot of like story maps, podcasts, infographics. So again, it's about messaging and science delivery and getting that exchange to whether it's different audiences or in different formats as well.
And if you're looking for field sites or managers to connect with your projects, the exchanges can be good folks to reach out to because they know managers in different areas that are, you know, open to having science on their lands essentially. Or if you're looking to understand what are some of the leading science and research needs in particular areas and landscapes, they can tell you what they're seeing, and they can then connect you with folks who are really struggling in certain areas and have really strong needs for new tools, new information.
Oh, thank you so much. That's good to know because I work on soils and microbes, and sometimes we get the information out, but sometimes I don't think it gets to the actual people that need it. It just kind of goes on journals and we talk about it with other micro people, but we don't get it to like the forest people. So that's good to know. Thank you.
I could add to that, you know, the exchanges are branches of the Joint Fire Science Program. So the science they're hearing about in their regions and networking with, that gets funneled up to the governing board for Joint Fire Science also. So, if, you know, that's helpful to network like that, Fabiola, and it's part of the bigger program stencing to get the science from the regions first, their priorities, and then funnel that up to the national office for future funding.
Thank you so much.
Hi, everyone. This is Theo. Sorry, I thought I'd jump in. I'm sorry I didn't turn my video on. It's dark where I'm at. But thanks, everyone, for the presentations and the discussion. You know, it's really informative. I'm a master's student, and I'm also red carded, and I'm planning on working in the summer. And I was wondering if it's possible to conduct research on active incidents as a part of our normal job duties. Is that something that the Joint Fire Science Program and the Fire Science Exchanges have supported in the past, or, you know, are interested in, you know, helping kind of make the connections? Because I feel like decisions probably have to go pretty high up the chain.
Right. That's an interesting question. Molly or Colleen, do either of you have any insight into that?
We have funded some work related to incident management in the past, and it's great that you're red carded. That gives you a head up, and if you're already working on a team. But I think I would encourage you to reach out to the team that you're working on and see what kind of support there is for kind of conducting any kind of research. So, I mean, it's a little different audience than perhaps kind of what you know, the land management community that David's talking about. But I think you still need to really make those connections to make sure any kind of questions you want to ask or any work is going to be feasible, and still kind of work on that team and not disrupt the team. So, but it's certainly within the realm of possibilities for things that we've looked at in the past. You know?
Thanks, Molly.
Yeah.
I think that really sums it up, but I think that when you propose research on incidents, I'm also red carded and have been an incident meteorologist for way too many years to tell, but there might be more questions asked of what you're doing coming from a place where people don't understand the connection between the Joint Fire Science Program and incidents. So I'd say if any of the pre-work that we did during the early part of this discussion with Casey can help you to be that bridge to educate and inform people about what we do and how it's important to land managers, I think that will go a long way. So sometimes when people are asking questions, it comes from a place that they just really don't understand what our role is and the research, the importance of the research. So if you need any other literature or information about the program that will help empower you as you're moving forward, I think that'll go a long way by doing some homework.
Great. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Well, thanks, Colleen. And Theo, you probably want to check with your employer first and foremost to get their support with that sort of activity. But it sounds really, I mean, you're in a unique position, so that I think there'd be some interest for sure.
Hey, Mark, this is Casey. I will say, Theo, that like being in wildfire for over 15 years as well, having that perspective of how the fire organizations work is a good experience, even if you're just, you know, the grunt on the crew or whatever your role is for the summer. It does give you kind of a unique perspective to kind of help tailor to maybe what the needs are for the future, because we're all looking at that kind of culture change of fire management. So don't discount your experience, even though they might not listen to what you're saying, but you know, and just knowing where the resources are, that like Colleen was saying, you know, introducing the exchanges to the fire management staff and stuff like that might be more valuable than you know. So just keep at it.
Right on. Thanks. Yeah, I appreciate it. I mean, it's all about trying to, you know, long-term management and preserve resources where we can, and, you know, try to make good decisions out there. So there's a lot of opportunity,
Yeah,
like today.
Excuse me. Theo, I forget, are you working for the Forest Service?
Yeah, I'm an AD read and ARC for the Mendocino.
Okay. Yeah,
So
you
it's,
know, the Forest Service has a pretty big research branch, and, you know, those might provide some good contacts for you as well.
okay, great. Thanks. I haven't been able to identify that in the limited research I guess I've done. I'll look again. Maybe I'll reach out if you might have a contact there I could talk to.
Sounds good. I'll get back to you. Yeah, thanks. We had another question from George, and I'm not sure, George, Jan, what your question was exactly. Can you go ahead and he wants to know if emails were sent only to the beneficiaries of Joint Fire Science Program. So is that in relation, George, to the email for this webinar or this Zoom call?
Please, I was just trying to find out whether those who were not awarded or those who were not awarded the GSP were also sent emails, because I also did apply for the GSP funding one, but I was just trying to find out if emails were sent, but probably I did not, you know, I did not see it or something like that.
I think I can answer that question. We're in the process. We just had the governing board meeting last week and put forth the recommended proposals, and we're going to be doing the notifications by the end of the month for everyone.
Oh, all right. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your question.
Thank you.
All right, we're ready to wrap this up. We're running out of time. Does anyone have a last question for our group? For the good of the order. Any last words of wisdom, Colleen?
I just appreciate everyone's time in this knowledge exchange. I think it's been a really healthy conversation, and I'd like to see more of this. So for everyone who participated, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you all. Thanks, Colleen, and everyone from Joint Fire Science and all the students and early career folks that joined us today. Stay tuned. We'll be back in the fall with our fall program, and also take a look at the Mentoring Futures program. Have a great day. Take care.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.